When you want your spring break to feel like... and your kids' pool day to feel like... and your hotel bed to feel like... ooh, and room service to feel like... because at Hilton, hospitality feels like...
Your cabana's ready. Would you like fresh towels?
It matters where you stay. Book now at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay.
Picture this. A curve in the road. A change in plans. Well, what do you say? With the all-new Audi Q3, the answer's always yes. Yes to adventure. Yes to escape. Yes to performance. Yes to comfort. Yes to right now. Because saying yes without hesitation, that's real luxury. The all-new Audi Q3, made for the yes life.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, we're going to talk about how plain old incompetence got thrown out somehow and has been solely replaced with weaponized incompetence. Not every incompetent person is weaponizing it. And you know what this reminds me of? When guys who have never struggled with depression say that their depressed wife is just lazy. Or people who have never struggled with anxiety saying that the person who's anxious should just calm down. That doesn't work. You don't understand. You don't understand. So some people just can't do things, and we'll talk about why and how just as soon as I tell you to subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was about sex in midlife. I tell it to you straight, what it is, what it isn't, what to expect, and over 220 extra
Eczema is unpredictable, but you can flare less with Ebglyss, a once-monthly treatment for moderate to severe eczema. After an initial 4-month or longer dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. Step up your sweat with the Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus. Swivel your screen 360 degrees and follow your favorite instructors on and off your tread. Track your form and reps with the movement tracking camera. Feel supported as you train on the cushioned slap belt and move to the beat with Sound by Sonos. Elevate your workouts with the Cross-Training Tread Plus.
Subscriber episodes, plus I'm writing every day at Buy Me a Coffee, so please sign up there. That is all new stuff. I haven't written every day in a long time, and now I am. All right, so it's very trendy to say that, you know, when a guy doesn't do something you want, he's weaponizing incompetence. So why can't he make the kids' lunches the way that you would? Because it's weaponized incompetence. Why can't he do bath time, quote, well, or clean the bathroom well, or do, you see what I mean? It's boring to even talk about it. Some people just don't do things well. Like, okay, obviously there's a part that you may be completely anxious and over-functioning, and I talk about this so much, like my podcast on ADHD and emotional labor. This is like the same emotional labor rhetoric that I hate, right? Some people, they just don't do shit well. They just don't do boring, routine stuff well. Do you know what those people have? I think you do because you've listened to my podcast long enough. They usually have ADHD. Some of them are just not that smart. That's the elephant in the room. Some of them just do not have common sense. People used to not have common sense, by the way. That used to be like a thing that was you were allowed to say, along with people's IQ scores, and there used to be the ability to say this person is smarter than this person. Now we can't say that anymore. We say this person has lower processing speed than this person. Guess what that means, right? Guess what that means. So we're going to go all the way like around loop-de-loop to say that one person does not think as quickly as another person. Yeah, I know. Everybody knows. And what that is called is not being as smart, right? You're not as quick-witted, as quick thinking, whatever it is. Maybe if you are given a long period of time, you could figure out something in the same time as it takes somebody with a short period of time. But I know who I would want to be my neurosurgeon. It would be somebody who could think in a short amount of time of how to solve the problem of my brain doing something unexpected. And most people agree, right? So point being, there are different levels of intelligence and different levels of competence. There's also different levels of fragility and strength and all sorts of things. So as somebody who struggles with depression, if somebody were to say to me that I'm just being lazy when I'm very tired, I'm not being lazy. But if there's somebody in the room that isn't depressed and that therefore can do something that I can't do because I went to sleep early, well, let them. That's awesome. And I would be very grateful. And my husband is often that person that does that. That, let's say, will get up earlier than me because his body wakes up earlier than mine wakes up, at least most of the time, and will start doing the stuff that he has to do. Now, he doesn't call me lazy, right? Now, let's say I didn't have depression. Let's say I was just one of these people that needs 9 hours of sleep all the time. Okay, well, if you're in a loving relationship, you also wouldn't call that person lazy. What you would do is figure out ways so that both people can do what they're best at. And sometimes one person is best at every boring thing around the house. And that doesn't mean the other person is weaponizing their incompetence. It means they have ADHD, most likely. Most likely. And if they cannot figure shit out, once you separate from them, watch, they weren't weaponizing anything. Their house is going to be a shithole. The kids aren't going to get to school on time. And if you really scratch beneath the surface in couples therapy and you say, and this happens all the time, women are like, oh, but you could do everything at work. And I'm like, how many times you get reprimanded for being late at work? They're like, that happens. I'm like, oh, do you tell your wife? No. Well, maybe you should tell your wife because she thinks that you prioritize work and that's why you're good at work. No, you literally get reprimanded at work too. You just don't tell her because you're embarrassed. So things are late at work. Things are sloppy at work. The boring tasks that cause the ADHD brain to go to sleep, they don't get done at work. They don't get done at home. And if you separate, they don't do it in the home that you're going to be co-parenting and having your kids in half the time either. And at that moment, you are going to realize that they really couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. It's usually ADHD. Sometimes a person is depressed. Sometimes they're anxious. Sometimes they have low energy levels. Sometimes they have low processing speed, whatever the case may be. They just can't do it. Most people who are not sociopaths, now there are some sociopaths, right? Very few. There are some narcissists, very few. This is a tiny percent, right? A single digit percent. If you put all the people with personality disorders together, including the sociopaths, which is antisocial personality disorder, it's still less than 10%. It's unlikely to be your spouse, right? If it is, they're also doing a lot of other mean shit. They're usually have gotten arrested. They're usually doing criminal behavior. They're usually cheating on you and lying. But let's say they're not. Let's say that they're just the person that can never remember to make the kids lunch. Do you know what ends up happening in those houses, by the way? It isn't that the person rises to the occasion if the other person doesn't make the lunch. They just don't make the lunch. So eventually the kids end up making the lunch, or school calls home and says you got to make the lunch, or the kids just get the school lunch. Now, if there is no school lunch and the school has called home, that person leaves their job and brings the kid lunch. That's what they do if they're alone, if they're like a widow or they're a divorced single person. And when that happens, the idea of lunch causes them a lot of adrenaline. So they, combined with the children, get some shit lunch together, which you're not going to like. You're not going to like their butter sandwich that they make, but they're going to make some shit lunch because they cannot think straight about these sort of tasks, and your kid's going to have it. And that's what would happen. Or their mother would move in with them, or if she has ADHD, they would find another spouse, or they would hire help. What does not happen is that they magically rise to the occasion after not being able to do it for your whole marriage. That just doesn't happen. I used to think the same thing when I was young. I used to think the same exact thing. If somebody had to do it, they would just do it. But think about how many people die under bad circumstances, right? Like everybody, being Jewish, you're raised with stories of the Holocaust, like constantly, right? And so you always visualize yourself as the person who survives, who's like scrappy and who survives. Even though my grandmother's whole family died in the Holocaust, it's still adaptive to think about yourself as a person who would survive. But guess what? In that situation, in prisoner of war situations, in regular old war situations, in combat, not everybody survives. Not everybody can figure out a way to rise to every single occasion. Some people get their kids taken from CPS, by CPS for neglect because they can't figure out how to feed the kid lunch every day. This is real. It's reality. Now, if you are one of the very, very, very few people that had a husband who, this is so far-fetched. It's hard for me to even say it, but had like a pristine, well-decorated home and was cooking himself, making himself lunches to take to work every day. I mean, this is in the realm of the absurd, but and he was really on it. His house was spotless. Then he got married and he said, "Oh, I don't know. I just think you could vacuum better than I can." Well, then, you know what? He's probably cheating. He's probably lying. He is an actual sociopath. But that is not who I see ever. When we actually take a walk back through the history, she's like, well, yeah, he was always messy, but, I figure, he just didn't grow up yet. And, but I thought maybe it was just because he had a drinking problem. I'm like, he had a drinking problem? You never mentioned that? Well, yeah, he used to binge drink a lot. And so that's why the house was really messy. It's like, girl, you had so many problems. You had a red flag factory. You ignored it. And now you're thinking that maybe he could make like the lunch for your kids. He can't make the lunch for your kids unless you want the lunch to be a piece of shit, right? And if you co-parent with him, probably he'll remarry instantly and that person will make a nice lunch for your kids. But if he doesn't, you're going to see the shit lunch that they come home with, right? And if you want to drop them off at lunch and be waiting there at the gates of the school all the time, you're going to probably do that, because the lunch is going to be such shit. But what's not, or he's just going to DoorDash it all the time, which is something else you wouldn't have liked because you would have said, why are you outsourcing it? If I can't do it, then why do you, if I can do it, why are you outsourcing it? People they just cannot wrap their head around that they chose a person that's incompetent. They just can't. It sounds bad to say like, oh, I just picked a wife who's so depressed, periodically can't get out of bed. Oh man, that sounds like a bad choice. That sounds like a bad choice for real. I say this as somebody who struggles with depression. It sounds like you really didn't predict how that might impact your life, And it sounds like you were in the honeymoon stage. Sounds probably like your mother was depressed and you were drawn to a woman with depression and you never really thought about it until I said it in therapy at this very moment. But reality is, she struggled her whole life. And they're like, well, yeah, her dad used to do everything for her. But I just figured that's because she was really, young and she was still in college. And so her parents did do everything for her. Now that I'm thinking about it, first, they helped her with registering for her classes. And then when I met her, I took over registering for her classes because she would get so overwhelmed, even then, by what I thought was a cursory administrative task. Yes, she did. That's because she's always struggled with depression. And depression manifests in many different ways. Some of us could do lots of admin tasks, but we're very tired. Some people cry more. Some people are angry. Whatever the case may be, nobody chooses to be incompetent. That's reality. Nobody gets up in the morning saying, you know what, I hope that my spouse thinks of me today that I'm really fucking incompetent. That would really warm the cockles of my heart to be thought of by my spouse as completely useless and as somebody who is in fact pretending and malingering and faking ADHD or depression or whatever so that they could get out of doing shit. That's what I really, really want my spouse to think of me like. Nobody thinks like that. Unless, as I said, they are really a sociopath. So in the case that they're not, why don't you think of it like this? It is just as bad for a guy to say, my wife is lazy. She says she's depressed, but I know if she just worked out more, then she wouldn't struggle with lifelong genetically coded debilitating depression. Or my wife is anxious to the point that her heart is racing, frequently thinks she's having like a heart attack. And, her mom was the same. But, if she just listened to me to calm down, Then we'd be in a whole other relationship. Or my husband with ADHD, he just isn't trying hard enough. This has plagued him for his entire life. He has now recently told me that he also fucks up at work. His friends say that he can't remember his ass from his elbow. He never makes plans with anybody. He just goes along with everything. He's messy as the day is long. He used to have various addictions. He eats too much. He drinks too much. He games too much. He sits around too much. He scrolls for hours. But, if he just tried, then he could turn into the person who packs the best lunch in the world. No, he can't. He can't. And there's an exception, of course, which is the honeymoon stage where everybody looks better. So say in the honeymoon stage, your wife wasn't as depressed. In the honeymoon stage, your husband had adrenaline coursing through his veins to the point that actually he did make an omelet that time. Well, girl, you've been living on that omelet for a long time. You have been telling yourself for a long time, he made me that omelet. There was that Valentine's Day where he made me a CD. And it even had songs that I had mentioned to him, and therefore he has the capacity to do the shit work in our relationship for perpetuity, even though it's extremely boring. No, he doesn't. That was the honeymoon stage. That was then. This is now. You also don't act like you used to. Whatever your issues are, probably anxiety. If you're married to somebody with ADHD, then you can't just get rid of them either. So what do? You say, well, each person does what they can do. Some people can't do very much. In that case, you got to figure out help. You have to hire help. You can sock away less into your 401k and hire somebody who comes and makes the lunches. And if you, or you could do what nobody does anymore, which is move closer to family, which is how all this shit used to happen. The woman's mother usually would come help her. The kids could go to other places, like in the family, would live on the same block, and the kids would go here or there. It was more of a village. There's a lot of people who want the impossible. They want to be completely self-sufficient while coupled with an under-functioning partner. You can't do that as a couple. You cannot go live in a new city, not pay for help, have an under-functioning partner, both work full-time, have multiple children, not get any paid, again, I say paid or unpaid help, and be happy. You can't do all those things because nobody ever used to do all those things. That's not possible. If you want to be extremely over-functioning, then you can do everything that they can't do. If that makes you too resentful, then you can also get divorced. But what is unfair to do is to say that somebody can just be better. People cannot just be better. They cannot just have more energy, have more focus. They can't. Sometimes they could go on medication. Sometimes they could have coaching or therapy that really changes them. But let's say that they have tried these things, because they have most of the time. By the time they get to me, I call myself the therapist of last resort because people have been to a lot of things. So if your husband has tried Adderall and it only does so much, and he's tried therapy and, that therapy doesn't really work for ADHD because, as I said, it's something in your brain, but Adderall works all right until it stops working. And some people have side effects and some people it stops working, as I just said. So if you're trying all that you can, then what you really need to do is get into couples therapy and learn how to love each other despite your weaknesses. Because if he was in a wheelchair, you wouldn't say that you could leave him, and he would do a lot less probably than he does now. And the same thing if you are somebody who calls your wife with depression or anxiety, or your husband with depression or anxiety lazy, or just somebody who likes to worry, or however you think about it with no empathy. So that's that. There's incompetent people. I hate to tell you, there's a whole normal distribution of competence, and especially competence doing boring day-to-day things. And if there was a gun to somebody's head and he can make the children's lunches, or there was a gun to a depressed person's head and they only had to sleep 4 hours a night, they certainly would. That would be an emergency situation, and the brain goes into crisis mode. In terms of migraines, which I have, there is a book on migraines, and it says that there were people, it's going to be a second Holocaust reference, who were in the concentration camps that did not get a migraine the whole time. And then as soon as they got liberated, they got migraines again. Guess why? Because their body was telling them, if you have a migraine, when you have to stay in the barracks, you're going to get killed. You're going to die, right? And so the body didn't have migraines. But remember what I also told you. Guess who we don't know about? The people that did get migraines and then they died. Right? We don't know about those people because they couldn't come out and tell Oliver Sacks about it for his book about migraines. So not everybody has emergency mode. Not everybody does rise to the occasion, and not everybody can choose. Nobody can choose how competent, how smart, or how good under the boring routineness of daily life they are. Nobody can. But if you love each other and you respect each other and you can use outside the box solutions, then most people, after they have this come to Jesus and they accept their partner for what they are, they can be happy. People who continue to insist that the person's being lazy or weaponizing incompetence, they're not happy. And they end up getting divorced, and then they're dealing with the incompetence in a different house where they have no control over what goes on. All right, thanks for listening, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.